I'm going to go over some stocks that are in the red with gaps to the south side so that I can potentially look for gaps to the upside. Hi, everyone. It's Dow on the Dow. The first up is O, Realty Income Corporation. We ended the day at 46.22, down more than 5.5%. The 52-week low, 45.04. The 52-week high, 68.85. The one-year price target, $60.09, which represents a 30% increase from where we are. I am in this trade for my mom. Now, this is where we ended. To the north side takes us to roughly 46.50 at resistance. To the north side of that, a gap forms to the upside at 48.21. 2 standard deviations is roughly 48.43. That gap closes out to the north side at 49.01. And if it does close out, I will anticipate a pullback because we are at resistance here. Now, to the north side of that, 49.41. And at 4 standard deviations and another possible take profit area and resistance, $50.39. Now, to the south side, 44.56. 43.62, and at another level of support and a possible buy-in area, 42.63. This is on the 5-minute time frame, and I'm giving you price targets for Tuesday. Now, looking left, you can see that this gap closed to the downside at 49.31, and back here, this one closed out at 50.23, and this one at 50.33. And we have a gap that I have not extended over here that will take us to potentially 53.75. We are not in that channel yet. That's just something to be aware of. And ignore all these horizontal lines. These are my former support and resistance lines. The RSI right now is at 56 and pointing straight up. The next one I'm going to go over is DXCM. Dexcom. We ended the day at 84.91, down nearly 5%. The 52-week low, 74.75. The 52-week high, 139.55. And the one-year price target is 125.43, which represents a 47% return from where we are. Of course, a lot of heartache and headache in between to get to that level. But that would be long-term investing. All right, we ended right here. To the north side takes us back to the middle of the trend and resistance at 88.09. Now let me change this. It gapped up, so we will be gapping down. And I will mark that out, right? But I'm going to go to the north side once again. First, back to the middle again, 88.12 roughly. That gap formed at roughly, 89.99, all right? And 2 standard deviations takes us to 93.27. 3 standard deviations and another possible take profit area, 95.90 and 98.46. Again, ignore all the horizontal lines. I should delete them, but I have not yet. At -2 standard deviations, 82.84. That gap closes to the south side at 81.37. So if I were trying to get into this trade, I would be waiting personally till we get down to these levels. because I don't need to get in too prematurely when I see a stock with a gap to the south side. And there are too many other trades I'd rather make. All right. -3 standard deviations, if I haven't said it already, since I sidetracked there at 80.33, and at -4 standard deviations, 77.70. Note the buy-in here at support, or basically near this line. And then what happens at resistance? The stock falls down, makes its way back up to resistance. That's the take profit area and your cue to get out if you are just trading, day trading, getting in and getting out. And then we go down, back up again, and then we fall back to support, busted through, and then went sideways again, and now we're down here. And so if we touch along this line, I will anticipate a bounce, and then possibly going down again so that we close out this gap. Looking left, I tracked a gap that closed to the upside at roughly, this isn't perfect here, but at 83.85. Sometimes I will go through and mark out the gaps very quickly, and then I will fine-tune it later. The RSI is going down at 28. So again, I will anticipate a movement to the upside because we are oversold down here. The next one I want to go over is Tesla. This one has been a nightmare to the downside. All right, we ended the day at 197.39. Down nearly 5%. The 52-week low, 101.81. The 52-week high, 299.29. And the one-year price target, 241.79, which represents a 22% increase from where we are. Now, to the north side, takes us to 203.06, 205.75, and 208.48. To the south side, 192.38, 189.56, and 186.96. So this gap right here, I will extend out. I tracked it earlier. And this is a gap to the south side. We've been trying to close it, but we have not yet done that. But that closes out at roughly 193.25. Right. And when I last looked at this at 205.76, we gapped up, which means there's going to be a gap down, right? But anyway, so we hit basically resistance, started to fall down, back to support, back up to resistance, another sell-off, and then we jumped up here, sold off, back down to support, fell through that support line, tried to get to this other level support, didn't make it there. We bounced up to resistance, back down, and then making our way down, and now sideways. Now, as far as this gap, what goes up must come down. And in this case, it did fill right there. It touched at 206.17. So that gap is no longer in play. This gap closed out at 212.50. And this is the one I talked about earlier. And I just marked that out here. So it's roughly in this range, 193.42, 35-ish. I'll just delete this right here since. Oh, I can't because my recording screen won't let me go down that far. All right. This looks like a mess, but this gap closed at 209.29. This gap closed to the upside at 219. But look at this 5-minute chart. how it's going straight down. I do not like that. Does not look good. But as you know, Tesla can turn around on a dime. And the RSI is at 50. Let me show you the 1 day. Okay, and if you look obviously at different time frames, they will give you different buy and sell signals and different gaps to fill that you may not see elsewhere. But I have a gap that takes us down to 145.89. Of course, we may never get there, or it could take a very long time to do so, but just keep that on your radar. And notice how I can see that when I pull out, okay? And this gap closes at 81.64. Fingers crossed we don't get that low. I do not like to play to the south side. But if I'm very close and this goes down, then I'll just wait before I make an entry to close out a gap. Or you just play the gap fills to the north side or to the downside. You can play the shorts and puts. And look at that. Below 25 now. Let me see this on the monthly. So that's the daily. This is the weekly. Still got room to get down to 30. And on the monthly, we're still going south. All right, there's some more blood in the water for Tesla, but you can get out daily, obviously, if you are day trading, getting in and getting out. All right, and the next one is ENPH on the monthly there. Going down, it will look more attractive to me when we hit 30. Take this back to the 5-minute time frame. Okay, we are at 52. All right. I've talked about this many times in the past. I'll work on the gaps in just a moment, but this is where we are. 78.63, down more than 4%. The 52-week low, 76.06. 52-week high, 339.92. The 1-year price target, 120.15, which represents a 52% increase from where we are. And to the north side, 83.75, 87.71, and 91.79. To the south side at support, and if we get to this area, I will anticipate a little bit of a bounce. 75.44, 67.58, 63.43, and 59.41, another level of support and a possible buy-in area. And if you want to play VWAP, VWAP is basically at 78.46. So we are right there at VWAP. To the north side of VWAP takes us to 80.32 and 76.60. I am going to remove that. Now, this gap that I tracked, this gap went down, so that means it will fill up when it eventually does. Who knows whenever that is, but I will extend this now. And this gap will fill at eventually 96.01. I like to make my gaps that go up in green and red if it's going to the south side, but this is going to the north side. So if we make it to 2 standard deviations, I will anticipate it filling and then falling right back down and then grinding its way back up. It will not fill in one day, or the likelihood of it doing so is pretty slim. All right, this one that I tracked, that opened up on the 20th there, it appears, and it gapped down, so that means it will eventually gap up to fill that. We've tried to get there, but did not get all the way up because Gaps typically take a while to fill. It tricks you out, psychs you out, makes you want to get out, lose money, and then you see it pop, and then that's when you get very upset. So you have to be patient. All right, so that takes us to 115.88. We are not in that channel, very far away from it, but keep that on your radar. And it is going down, as is a majority of the stocks that I'm looking at. But look at all these little gaps that will also eventually fill. All right. And if you don't see gaps to the downside, the likelihood of it gapping to the downside is still pretty great. You just have to move your time frame. All right, but I'm going to try to clip along here. There are a few more I want to get through. The next one is ADI. And I'll go through it very quickly on the 5-minute time frame. 155.79 to the north side, 157.18. A gap begins to the north side at 158.02. Closes out at 2 standard deviations, basically. But here, let me just do this. 160.26 to close it out. 2 standard deviations, 160.55, 162.29, 163.92. To the south side, 153.87, 152.10, and 150.37. And we have this gap right here that has not closed out. If you turn the magnets, it helps you be a little bit more precise. Now I need to turn this to green because it's a gap to the upside because it gapped down. There we go. And then this gap already, it gapped up, so it's going to gap down, already closed out right here at roughly 159.93. So that is no longer in play, but this one still is. That will close out at 164. All right. I think I went to the south side. Did I? I got sidetracked. But just in case, again, roughly 153.83, 152.10, 150.33. The next one is microchip technology. $70.66 is where we ended. This gap to the north side here. Let me remove the magnet. Okay, so to the north side takes us back to the middle of the trend and resistance at 70.84. That gap forms to the upside as you saw me draw out at 28, 72.05, 72.65, 73.55, and roughly 74.49 to the south side. 69, 68.08, and roughly 67.18. There's a gap here that you can see, but that gap, since it gapped up, needs to gap down, and that got filled right here at 71.40. And there's a gap right here, as I can see. Like, there are so many gaps on every stock, basically, that you can play to the upside or the downside, or wait for price to get to that if you're not in a rush to get in on a trade. Okay. Just want to make sure I did that run precisely. And again, I have to remove that magnet. I turn it on to get the gap and then I remove it because it's hard to then get this exactly right. Okay, that gap closes up at 75.96. Now the next one is Ford. There's a gap to the north side right here at, I'll just do the bottom, 10.97 and 11.36. Looking left, I tracked one right here that just closed out on, looks like Thursday of last week. Oh no, it didn't. It just touched it. So that is still in play. Can you see that? I don't like how the chart's going down as well. Nope, that gap is not closed out. So the potential to go back up and close would take us to roughly 12.01. That reset. Looks like there's another gap right here too. But you get the picture. I do love looking for gaps. See, you've got to pull it. This is not. I need to reset this. Yeah, just track your favorite stock every day so you can see patterns develop or gaps. And you can get in and out very quickly. This is just something to work off of. Potential, I should say, too. So that one will take us to roughly, oops, see how that magnet messes with you? So then I have to delete it, and that will take us to 12.24. Okay, the next one, this gap closed out here, so that is no longer in play. Oh, well, just tiny, a tiny, tiny bit. But for the most part, it's closed out. But if we get to 3 standard deviations, that'll close out entirely. See how that did not quite touch? Okay, so that would touch 3 standard deviations. Let me remove my all right, and -2 standard deviations takes us to 138.22. I'm going to end this video because it's getting very long. So we've got a gap here. Turn back on the magnet. Extend my gap. Okay, there's one. There's another one right here. But you get the picture. All right, there we go. So the potential to get to 109.07 is there, and the 1-year price target is 134.73. IQV, there was a gap here, but it touched already right there, so that is no longer in play. To the north side at 2 standard deviations, 181.62 and 172.60. DHR, big gap right there. Turn on my magnet. It gaps down, so I have drawn it to go to the upside. Gaps down, that means it will gap up if it eventually closes out at, turn off the magnet. See how much I have to do every day to play these gaps. Look for gaps for trades that you'd like to do. All right. So 2 standard deviations takes us to 46.47, and -2 takes us to 45.37. And Northrop Grumman here. Ignore this line. We had a little gap here that already closed to the downside, I see. And look how this 5-minute chart, the zone is going straight down there. All right, -2 standard deviations takes us to 472.15, and -2 takes us to 461.31. And finally, this is it, Oxy. Notice how the sell-off appears right here at resistance. The buy-in and the clear sell signal here too. Oh, we have a nice little gap to the upside. Turn on my magnet. Extend the box. Turn off the magnet. $65.18. Now, two standard deviations, I should say, is 62.29, and -2 standard deviations is roughly $60.82. All right, that does it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Have a great trading week.